One, two, three, four.
Hey, whoa, hey, whoa. And welcome back to another episode of Breakfast with Brothers. Woo!
Shout out if you're eating breakfast out there. Thanks for all the homies that put on those eggs, that bacon, that breakfast sausage. We really appreciate the breakfast vibes because you're living it. Unfortunately, we don't eat breakfast on this show. Maybe one day we'll host a breakfast episode for real, to show you how to make a killer omelet. Until then, Breakfast with Brothers coming at you. Hope everyone's rocking and rolling today. Happy Wednesday, or when you'll be seeing this. Happy Friday. Got him.
Got your ass.
They'll never know until they do.
Yeah.
But for all you listeners out there, we do record on Wednesdays, so happy Wednesday from the past. And for the future, happy whatever listening day. Maybe it's a random Sunday. Not sure. But if you are listening, thank you for tuning in. Here we are again, back at it again with the white vans. And
Stop.
Still rocking. Yeah, I will stop. I will. Damn, Daniel. I will stop, I swear. But what are we talking about today for the cool folk of the Breakfast Clan?
Well, we're talking about cavemen.
One caveman?
No. I said cavemen.
Ah, okay.
Not specifically one caveman. We'll get him next time with that,
Caves and men. If I was a man in a cave, I'm not really sure what I'd do. Do you think you'd make a bed first? Like, if you were a caveman, like, would you focus on making a bed first, or would you go and find, like, food, or maybe water first?
I don't think they really, like, I mean, I can't say for certain. Of course, we're not, well, I guess paleontology is the study of, like, dinosaur bones, right?
Yeah.
I guess we're not, I guess I'll just go for a more general term. We're not historians in any manner. Please don't quote us on anything that we're about to say. This is all merely just guessing for us, probably.
Mostly hypotheticals.
Yeah, if anything. But if I have to say that they probably didn't care for bedding. Like, sure, yes. Like, to some extent, they wanted to lie on something comfortable. So I'm sure they used, like, pelts of sort that they just, skinned from animals and such. But other than slight comfort, I think their main priority was food and water.
And apparently fire, from what we've seen on memes and other documentaries off the History Channel. Although
Yeah,
I do feel like if I was a caveman, not that I'm saying I would rather be one than, what we exist in right now, but for the sake of being in a comfortable bed, I can't imagine that they had many resources to them to make, well, the word comfortable exist. I feel like as a caveman, the word comfortable was far from whatever they were having to go through. Of course, because in this case, they were, well, based on what religion you follow or evolution and science that you believe in, I'm sure cavemen weren't the first men. But for our sake of explaining right now, we'll go ahead and say that they were the first men and that they did not know what comfort meant. It was probably hardship 25/8. There wasn't one of those moments where it was just like, yeah, let's just hang out and maybe we can go eat some gummy bears, watch a movie. I'm imagining that comfort wasn't part of their dictionary by any means.
So picture this, right?
I'm here.
Caveman time. We hone in, camera pans in towards their cave.
Yeah.
Their shelter. Go through wide opening. No door. Thus, we get to back of cave, rounded out. Nice little pelts on the ground, right? Sleeping baby. Drawings up on the wall. Possibly a fire within. Possibly. Pan out.
Okay.
Caveman and woman tossing hands in the corner. Be- truly unruly human beings. No culture, simply surviving. Argument happens. Oogas have been boogad. Thus, we then pan to prehistoric saber-toothed tiger watching, approaching. Then we have mammoth in background.
Oh,
There we go. That's the picture we're kind of working with here, right?
So is this all to say that they were far from comfortable?
Oh yeah, I think in every sense of the word. I don't think there was really any. I mean, of course, we don't know for certain. I'm sure there is some place that there might be a little bit more detail, but for the most part, early age people were very. I wouldn't say uncultured because there really was no culture to base it off of, other than like small things here or there, depending on area and location. But for the most part, they were very in comparison to today, I would say very uncivilized in every sense of the word. Again, like mainly dependent on survival alone. Survival of just, making it through the day. Like, oh my god, this ball of fire is rising in the sky. Or this ball of something is blinding my eyes as I'm staring directly at it. What could it be? And then at the end of the day, you're like, oh my god, this massive orange circle, is dipping below the horizon. I know it's time that I need to go home, or at least go to my cave. Home sweet cave,
No, that's true. That's true. I have to imagine that things that they were experiencing, of course, in their case, being firsthand everything, being that no one else was there to guide them. They didn't have other sources of, well, resources to figure out what exactly they were seeing. So everything was a firsthand experience. And I feel like that has to be so surreal in itself. Not only in your case, describing what would be the sun, because as we know now, this giant orange ball in the sky is our heat source. For them, it was like, oh, okay, I'm a little warmer now. I don't know why I was cold when it was dark, but we'll go ahead and assume that this thing is our natural heater. Of course, another word that they probably weren't using. But I feel like jumping from where we were at with that picture, painting the whole story around beds and comfortability, I have to imagine that like a good day for them is not having to battle a saber-toothed tiger or run away from a mammoth. A good day was, and I know you said something about not having some type of culture to base things around, but their early traditional makings were probably gathering around a fire and eating in some fashion, and then sharing hunting stories. Of course, it could be a whole litany of things, gathering berries and fruit and things like that, or literally hunting for things that they actually could control. Of course, things out of their control, things that are bigger than them, faster than them, poisonous. That looks like a lot of not only good story times around the fire, but also things that probably dwindled their numbers rather quickly. Yeah, I'm sure there wasn't a lot of continual story time with Fred, Jim, Bob, and Georgina. It felt like a week would go by, the four of them would still be there, and then another week would pass, there'd be three of them, and then who knows? By the end of the month, maybe none of them were anymore, and then we had to venture on to the next story time tune from another local cave clan. Now, again, this is all hypothetical. No idea what history looks like or anything. But question, just to assure that we're on the same page here. The group of cavemen were among the creatures to be wiped out by the meteor, right? That's accurate?
I mean, I don't know if it is like in the sense that we're thinking is like fictional. Something created out of like the movies in this instance, or at least in like, you know what I mean by like how it's just like kind of created and then everyone kind of grasps onto that idea of like something, and in this point it is cavemen.
Well, I'm not saying it as the meteor was the Big Bang. That was pre-cavemen. I'm talking about what killed them.
No, I know. I'm just saying if our idea of cavemen is fictional in the sense of what we're thinking it as, or if there's actually, I mean, I know there's actual cavemen, but if our understanding of cavemen is completely skewed by fictional understanding of caveman, you know what? Forget it. You know what? Because I'm taking it off, and I shouldn't. Let me
Well,
just
I don't.
let me just
All I was going to say is that I don't think it was a fictional thing. I think the people that existed pre-meteor, even if we didn't call them cavemen, were completely non-fiction. If that's what we're settling on, I wouldn't say that we have some fictional idea of men that existed with the dinosaurs. I have to imagine that even if they didn't look like we did, if they were more gorilla-like, or even if they had 3 arms and 1 leg, like, I don't know exactly that we have to say they were bipedal. We could say, well, really anything, but we're just classifying them as cavemen right now because
yes,
that's all we've come to understand. So I wouldn't say that we're existing with this fictional mindset. I think the non-fictional idea of cavemen exists without a doubt, and just our hypotheticals from there are just us, kind of jumping into fire, hunting, the gathering, some naturally unborn cultural tradition that they didn't know what to call because it was just living in their mindset.
yes, I know. All I'm saying is that there could have been possibly a fictional idea to it all, but besides the point, doesn't matter. Don't care. Gone behind. Um, to answer your question, yes, it would be like the ones before. Like it was, you were asking if we're talking specifically about the ones before the meteor hit, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, well, I guess then my question would be if they actually spoke like, I mean, I'm assuming they would have to have spoken a language of sorts, a language of their own creation. Um, Understanding that there was, like, obviously they figured out some sound can be, created.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious what you think their language would have been.
I don't know if there was any necessarily, let me put it this way. I don't think they had some type of like spoken words. I can't say for certain that there was some type of alphabet system that they existed on. I think the majority of it was more likely noises. The louder the noise, the more frantic, the more panic that ensued. The quieter the noise, the more lulled, the more calm it was. And then everything in between was kind of in that instance. I think everything was probably based around the experiencing that you were going through in that moment. And other people around you, more or less, and this is just a guess, took to what was going on in the circumstance. So for example, if that person had experienced what that person was making a noise about, then they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that makes sense." Or if that person saw something happening to someone that they hadn't experienced, they would probably be making confusion noises or something of the sort of, "Huh, uh-huh, huh," and just maybe in that circumstance discovering something for themselves. And I have to imagine that noise system eventually became certain types of noises set up for certain type of circumstances. And I'm only saying this because obviously the alphabet and what we know it as is ever changing from what do we call it? From heritage? No, from I don't know if you know what I'm getting at here, but from sect of ancestor from sect of ancestor. Like each sect and each tribe had probably what was their own, we'll call it common tongue. And in this case, I'm just saying that cavemen probably used noise. Now, I don't know. I have no idea. I'd love to hear what you think was their sense and mode of communication. But had they figured out what they could do with their mouths and the noise they could make and vibrations with humming or singing and stuff like that, it just looked like, what I was speaking of. So go on with your theory here. I really want to hear what you think the cavemen were rocking and rolling with because I'm interested.
I mean, truthfully, I think there was very little noise.
Hmm.
Maybe not understanding how to well, if you think about it, you think about babies, right? They just kind of just screaming, right?
Sure.
For the most part, or at least like little
Yeah, the
type deal.
random noises, the gurgles, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
So, I mean, I'm sure there was probably some better articulation as they aged, but you got to remember too that like cavemen and women probably did not live for very long.
Probably not.
So I'm thinking like, cause okay, so take for instance like let's put up a comparison like daily life, right? Like as is right now, if we compare between a like office worker and a blue collar worker, right?
Okay.
Just as a comparison, who's gonna look older? Who do you think?
Probably the blue collar worker, just from labor
Right.
intensive, practice, stuff like that.
Exactly. So with that in mind, with someone who might work outside or do more of a manual labor kind of position, your body weathers and wears a bit more than say someone who's working at a desk.
Yeah.
So now put that on crack, right? Like like their bodies had to have been ravaged. I mean, absolutely ravaged, day
Sure.
in, day out. Like obviously, until they were old enough to kind of function on their own as a baby,
No, I'm with you.
they were basically thrown to the wolves, literally.
Literally
Like, all right,
thrown. Yeah. That was
all
their
right, here you go.
sacrifice every month. New baby, wolf, get out of here. We gave you something.
Here's your spear. There's a saber-toothed tiger that's been bothering us for the past week. Kill it. And meanwhile, little Jimmy's getting a spear that's like 10 times bigger than him. He's about 4 years old, and he's like, all right, this is it. Here we go.
Here we go.
maybe 3. Who knows?
Right.
But point I'm getting to, and wrapping it full circle back to the speech, like they had to have like come up with something, at least somewhat audible for others to hear. So I think I agree with you in the sense of like maybe expressive noises, because there's a primal instinct in most cases of fear, happiness, maybe not so much sadness. I think sadness might be more with anger in such a primal like view.
Yeah.
So I would say there was probably those 3: fear, happiness, and anger were probably like the 3 consistent like emotions.
Or maybe even like curiosity and confusion. Something that in this case was new to them, something that what they didn't understand. So I have to imagine
Yeah.
curiosity and confusion was probably a lot of the time what was going on in their mind. And that probably turned into something that you're describing, the happiness, anger, sadness, just dependent on what their experience goes in with, taking care of an action that they didn't know of, or eating something that they didn't know about, or attacking something that they thought was harmless, or what have you. Random experience.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I would think so. Like when I think of maybe even this like prehistoric time,
Yeah.
I think of like the ancient Sumerians with the first scribe of writing.
Yeah, cuneiform. Yeah, right.
Yep. And it was just literally triangles. I mean, that's really what it consisted of, was just triangles, whether they were, straight up and down, upside down, or sideways. That's pretty much all it was.
Mm.
And they were able to write, just in general, they were able to write. First known written language in like history from what we're aware of and what we
Yeah.
have and what we found. So that leads me to believe that there probably was some type of language used, just in a very simplistic form. I think it's just a step higher than like kind of what you described. I'm sure there had to have been some form of language, and maybe it wouldn't be considered language because of what they used. But I think there's a very good chance that there was some sort of spoken word, in the most simplest of terms.
And maybe even, I think now that you're posing a good direction here, that form of their language, if it was written, was probably super symbolic. For example, a rock would be a circle. And of course, I'm sure they figured out that they could use ash from burnt logs to write certain things against rock, or they could even, use water for, of course, temporary writing on dry surfaces, or even mud, so that way that would dry indefinitely and be permanized once it does dry. And I imagine, now just bear with me here, that if those symbols existed, and I'm thinking of a few examples: circle, a rock, a tree, maybe a longer stick or something like that, that they're just using super basic shapes. And then they're telling people, in and around them in their own language that this is this, this is this. And then if you're trying to maybe group things together, those symbols would exist next to each other, or maybe they would combine to form one symbol, something like that. I have to imagine that similar to how Spanish is with conjugations and forming sentences, that they were able to do something similar, minus all the grammar and all the plural nonsense and the exceptions of words and things like that. They probably, like you said, kept it very simple to the point where if they had, and I like how you brought the lifespan into it, if they had people that made it to 25 plus, and we'll just, use normal years in the sake of time, if they made it to 25 plus, that they were able to teach, kids who are 5, 6, 7, 8, the common tongue in this, denomination of simplistic form, which is interesting to think because when you were talking about taking care of like certain basic tasks or showing someone how to gather berries or hunt or whatever, I was immediately thinking of scenarios where these people put themselves into those moments of happiness, anger, and sadness. And what was the third one you said?
It was happiness, anger, sadness, and then fear.
Fear, right, yes. So I'm imagining if going into these scenarios and they were experiencing any one of those against a new experience, that if something ended up making them fearful, that they went and alerted other cavemen, cave people, and were like, hey, like, you gotta come with me. Like, I can't do this alone. Like, we're gonna need some extra hands on this, and it was just shared experiences that then, if there were enough people that there was no fear, and now it was, okay, I think we can do this, confidence, and probably leading in towards the happiness sector of things, they were like, oh, okay, well, we have we can do this with 6 people. If any less people come, we will die, or we will be seriously injured in some fashion. So I imagine that all those new experiences that one person would go out and be like, no, nope, not for me. That they would have to go and talk to someone, and then they would bring that person out. And if both of them were again equally like, no, 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 we're not doing this alone, then those 2 people would go back and do the same exact thing, and bring another person. Because I have to imagine that I'm sure the intelligence levels initially was just like, whatever, what can it do? Dies, that person's done for, or they get seriously injured and they can't tell
Yeah.
anybody because they can't make it back to their cave or whatnot. So I imagine as the cave people existed and days went by, they slowly were able to gather information from their surroundings. And I know we're not giving them a lot of credit for having gone through stuff as far as gaining intelligence and understanding, but I have to imagine they had to adapt rather quickly. And that's just again a hypothetical in my mind about their existence and their surroundings and their experiences.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, for as much slack as we're giving them, like in the sense of just like, coming at them full force here.
We're
I'm
coming.
sure they are much more capable than us in actually surviving, obviously outdoors,
Right.
in every sense of the word. Even doesn't matter how good of a survivalist you are today. These guys obviously were real deal, survived through this, and if they, like you said, if they lived to the ripe age of 25, they are extremely
Right,
lucky.
yeah.
They are extremely lucky because truthfully, they probably could have. There's probably on average anywhere between 20 and 30 like years old, with some of the oldest members, and I think in some cases there's probably some older people, but it's all dependent on what they were able to do. If they were more hunter gatherers and essentially moved with the herds and followed
Yeah.
the food, there are cases where you need to essentially let go of the old because they cannot keep up. And now, depending on what they were capable of doing, sure, they could have brought them with them and were able to defend themselves and continue forth. But we're talking about like large animals after them. In most cases where nothing was truly, I mean, I'm sure there were some safe spots and they knew where to stick. But you get the image I'm painting here.
No, I definitely there.
It's just like I think the image that kept popping into my mind as you were speaking when you were talking about like, yeah, no, I need like 8 more guys and we could take
Yeah.
down this thing was was just like walking around at night. Um
Oh, sure.
obviously hearing all these noises and such, but just encountering things unimaginable to us in every sense of the word. Um Now I don't know the actual timeline and such, but just imagine, right? Just imagine you're out walking outside, right?
Yep.
It's absolutely bright, full moon. No light pollution whatsoever. You can see everything with the shine of the full moon.
Yeah, true.
But within the trees and the forests and the jungle, I guess, in some stances, it's utterly dark. And you're walking back to your cave after a failed hunt attempt with your fellow men, and there's only 2 of you returning out of like a party of 9, um, completely ravaged, right? Walking through the jungle, the woods, and it's just the 2 of you. Next thing you know, it's you're by yourself. Your other guy gone. You're like, oh, yeah, where did he go?
Yeah, what?
And then you start getting worried, or at least you start fearing. And then you hear like a low, like clicking sound, right? And then it turns into like a it. I'm trying to paint the image of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex like pulling up on you,
Dude.
lurking. Because you ever hear the actual sound like a T-Rex made, not like the artificial one they made for the movies and such.
I can't say I have. I mean, like you said, the artificial one, I feel like that's the one that is most in my head that I can think of.
Right, like extremely loud roaring and everything, No.
Well, previous to the roar, them being the sneaky hunters, them being, of course, the vibrations in the ground. They're heavy animals. It's not one of those things where they could be super sneaky, but them being low enough to the point where they're still stalking their prey, they're hunting their prey, to the point where, like you said, that it's terrifying enough that, it's a little too quiet. That type of vibe.
Yeah. I mean, sure, they very well could have just been like waiting and watching them as well.
Oh
It's
yeah,
a
true.
very good probability that they could have been being stalked already. I mean, you got to think. So, like, if a T-Rex is walking around, right?
Yeah,
Obviously other dinosaurs are also walking around. So
hundred
you
percent.
begin, I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't let their guard down in the state that they are. But in this case, things could mesh together either way, no matter what sounds you're hearing. Um, so it very well could have been stalked by this, but I implore every single one of you, whoever's listening out there, and you as well, Zach, to look up the actual sound a T-Rex made, because it is utterly terrifying. And then whenever I hear it, I always imagine like being in the woods and hearing that. It's terrifying, dude.
Well, I'm
Absolutely
imagining at
terrifying.
that point you don't have any survivors. At that point, if the T Rex has made that noise,
No, well, that's
it's
that's
likely
exactly
that
my point. You're dead.
yeah, yeah, right.
You're
That
dead.
hearing that noise is your death sentence, and knowing that cavemen had to exist with the dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures, they are leagues ahead of what we see in regards to size comparisons to current animals, current predators, things like that. So not only having to be, well, forthright in their adventures as far as being weary, being cautious, being fearful of things, but also knowing what that manpower looked like to even be able to cause either some type of commotion to escape, or in some regard, hey, we're gonna bring some of the old guys with us, in case we run into anything bad. Like we know that the 6 of us can outrun the 2 old guys. So if things get bad, like we know that the 2 old guys are done for. Um, I'm imagining that there were certain implications where things were inevitable, where it didn't matter how much effort you put in as a person, that you were pretty much just coming out with, well, yes, knowledge of the situation that you were going into, because now you brought people, the experiences together, and you're trying to get out of some situation, whether it's just as simple as hunting and gathering, or as dangerous as trying to maybe cross an open river where you know there's danger lurking. So I feel like the cavemen, cave people, cave persons, putting themselves into these circumstances, these outcomes were just inevitable. And I imagine that the thinning rate of these the cavemen was just one of those things where it was like, just another day. And for them it was normalcy. For them, losing people was, oh, it's a random Tuesday. Well, I think we lost Clyde along the way. I'm pretty sure Fred lost his foot a couple days ago, but he's chilling.
Yeah,
And
Uncle
for the
Sherm, like we
yeah,
lost him like 2 hours ago. Yeah, I don't know where he went.
but
I mean,
that's
but
like,
like, yeah. I was gonna say it probably in that instance, I think there was probably some sort of sadness to those that have been lost. Of course, I don't
Oh,
think it was just kind of like, oh yeah, we lost him like 2 days ago. It is what it is. No, I'm sure there was some sadness involved, especially if
oh yeah.
either they saw them, which more than likely they saw them get killed in some fashion. I'm sure. I'm
Oh,
sure there
absolutely.
was, yeah, I'm sure there had to have been sadness within that, but I think they understood that at their point in their time that they knew, like you said, it's inevitable. Like things like this will continue to happen. We just need to learn and do better, essentially, within their mindset. So I'm sure as time continued on, they've gotten better, and dependent on who was still alive to obviously continue that knowledge was the most important part, I'm sure, at some point. Um, though I don't know. It could have been to the point where it's just like very small collections of people. Um, maybe in some instances there was multiple clans, but I think to a more realistic point, I'm sure there were smaller clans or smaller sects of people, rather than like the example you were given before is like reaching out to the other guys over there. I'm sure there was
Right.
less of
Yeah.
less of that. I think it was more or less like, I wouldn't say small family, but large clan of family, and then 300 miles that way was another clan
Right.
or family in this instance. So even at that point, while we think there was the ripe age of 25 is like as old as you're getting, I think there was also a chance for, I
Living
don't know.
beyond that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I think there's a good chance that they could have made it to their 40s, and even that's like stretching it. But again, like you're talking about a body that is ravaged by the outdoors constantly. Um, yeah, I'd say like maybe like 35 is as old as they're getting. I think that's really pushing it in some instances because you age so much faster. Um,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you learn all this stuff relatively easily and quickly because you're within it. Just as like just as we are. I think our understanding of age is completely different in that time period.
Oh yeah, comparably, it's completely different. But no, seriously, I think that if you had to worry about, I mean, maybe not even worrying, thinking about the idea of living to that point where you, well, had the chance to get to 35, that was a long life in cave terms. And I think, like you said, getting to that point not only meant good decisions, being wise, being able to, well, fare the weathering of your body, because the majority of the time I'm sure they were traveling often. Say, for example, they found a cave that they made up as their home, and we'll call it home base in this case, that home base existed, I mean, for probably a good amount of time, that they could come back to it if, for example, there was a long trek for a hunt, or a long trek for going and speaking to a neighbor clan, I guess we'll call it, or even trying to evacuate for the time being if, for example, some new pest or some new predator or maybe even some weather condition that came through and completely had to uproot them from that area. I imagine that making this home base was somewhere where they could take the time to take care of their more elder population. And it's funny thinking that elder in this case is someone who's somewhere between 25 and 35. But
You mean our
as a
age?
realistic notion, what?
I said, you mean as old as we are?
As old as we are, elders, thinking that they, in that case, are the seniors of the group, knowing a lot of experience of what they've gone through and getting to that point. It's interesting to think about because in that case, they're old for their time as far as what they've been through. They had to grow up when they were like 8. And I'm talking about being able to hunt successfully, skin animals, cook food, not only care for the people who were older and dying, but also having to be responsible and navigate certain scenarios where, like you said, most of the time, I'm sure that if they knew territories that existed where danger lurked, the dinosaurs, the prehistoric big cats, in this case, the tigers and things like that, or other flying creatures, that there were majority of the time that they were staying out of those areas because there was a handful of people or even one or even two that went somewhere to look in this area and didn't come back. So the people who went and continued their journeys or their gatherings or whatever avoided these places because they knew if someone went there and didn't come back, it probably meant danger was in that area. And now I'm not saying that as a complete assumption, but the hypotheticals lead me to believe that, again, what I was saying earlier, that they weren't completely helpless. They weren't completely dumb. That there was some type of adapting within their cultural bounds that said, "Hey, listen, I know I know Fred didn't make it out of this one, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and throw it out on a limb. We shouldn't go back here." Now, of course, I'm sure there were people that went back there in bigger crowds and stuff like that, but it just goes to show that I think, and maybe I could be completely wrong, that they were smart in their own right because they had to adapt to whatever their environment threw at them. And of course, different from what you and I experience as what our environment throws at us for 100% of the case.
Listen, Tim got lifted by a mosquito 2 miles that way, and he's
Yeah.
gone. He's
Yeah,
gone, man. He got
he's gone.
literally got hit in the back, pulled up off the ground, and flew away. I don't even know, man. I don't even know. We're
That
not
would be
going
such an
back over there.
interesting conversation to hear, like, out loud in cave speak. I don't even know what I'm calling it that because I wouldn't know what the heck they called their tongue. But in the same regard, like, imagining that as a story, I'm thinking of like telling that to like 6 and 7-year-olds of the cave peoples, and it's just like, just like, yeah, and then the face. I think it would be even funnier if they were mimes. That would be hilarious. They just described everything without making a single noise. They just acted it out like it was a game of charades.
That would be terrible, dude.
That would be terrifying. Just having to go your whole life, like, I'm sure it was longer than just a couple weeks. I'm sure it was maybe not years, but I'm thinking a couple months went by before the first cave people that existed to hunt, gather, made it out of the womb instead of getting lurched out by a large bird, made it to the point where they knew they could start talking or making noises. For the longest time, they were probably just flailing their arms or kicking their feet. Maybe they were putting sticks on the ground to like signify amounts or just basic pictures of something. And then one day, like someone burps and they're just like, like they're getting surprised at themselves, because it's like, what the was that? That I think would be a ridiculous thought. Of course, more hypotheticals, but I'm trying to put myself in their shoes almost.
I have a feeling they knew they could make noise. And sure, maybe there was some struggle at first, but I think there was like noise made. I don't think they realized how they could like change the noise though that they were creating. I think that would be more on par with like just speech in general. I think it was more or less just like one noise they knew they could make, but they were unsure of how they could do it. thus which led them to try to like make other noises. And sure, it might have taken like some time, but I feel like something of that nature, because the noises, I feel like I said, like as a baby you make noise, so I think there's inherently like an ability to understand like your vocal your vocal noises that you can create. Sure, you might not be able to like how we view it today, like, oh, they'll be speaking soon kind of thing. I think they just kind of understood that we can make noise, and obviously as they procreate,
Yeah.
like they hear this as well. And so I'm sure like from that, like they had to have this knowledge of knowing how to like create noise. It's just a matter of like, what can I do with this? And like figuring that whole situation out, because I'm sure they were just like, I can make this noise and this noise. Can you make this noise?
Yeah, right.
Like just.
All right, now replicate that. Do as I do. Do me. Do you. Do as I do.
Listen, all I'm saying is cavemen probably would be awesome at like heavy metal music, like just, you know, type beat,
Yeah, just going absolutely wild, like mic noise wise. Just not even if it was anything that needed to be. What's the word I'm thinking of? I guess I'll just use the word. Not even anything that needed to be understood. Just noises in general. Because you're right, they would make killer bands. And now I'm wondering if they did stuff like that. Not maybe not instruments and stuff. I'm sure they banged rocks together and they were like, "Oh, that's cool." Hitting sticks on walls, maybe banging a couple tree branches into trees themselves. I have to imagine that in some fashion, these guys were making the most awesome, like board games. Well, not board games, field games, just different types of things that are the akin of baseball, kickball. I mean, I'm sure they even had a game where it was like, who's the last person alive after they tagged the velociraptor. I'm imagining that there was some really funny, exciting game that it just evolved from them, that eventually people just passed down and was like, huh, how other creative avenues could we get with here that would make sense? Of course, dying at the expense of playing Don't Touch the Velociraptor, I'm sure is ridiculously unsound. But for the sake of passing the time, I guess again we go back to the comfortability. I'm sure there were times where they were like, "Yeah, we're well stocked on food. I mean, we got a freshwater source. Let's go have some fun." I have to imagine that there was some downtime. I'm just saying.
I mean, possibly, but I feel like surviving out in the wilderness today for us,
Yeah.
is like it's a constant, especially like in the winter time. I think of winter too. It's like it's a constant battle to stay on top of everything that needs to be done, which
Sure.
is like getting wood for fire,
Yep.
making sure you have food. Now, in this
Yep.
case, like if they have a somewhat small family, then sure they could have killed they could have killed a mammoth the other day or something like that. They'd have meat
Imagine.
for they'd have meat for, I don't know, probably a full month.
Longer, probably.
But the problem with that, I mean, if they killed it in the wintertime, then that would make sense. They could at least keep it frozen. But did they have any semblance of understanding about meat? Probably not. What they probably viewed it as was like, I need to kill this to eat today. And then I need to do the same thing tomorrow. I need to go out and kill again.
Oh yeah.
So that's why I think it's more like, I don't know if they really had anything. Sure, they probably had kick rock, where you just go around kicking a rock.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's small little things that they did to kind of get their mind off of what they were doing. But I feel like, one, they probably had no sense of music. or any idea of that. Sure, like maybe like small little things, like if they knew how to make certain noises, maybe they could hum, just
Yeah.
do something like that. Especially if they're like in a cave where it like reverberates.
Absolutely. Good thought.
Reverberates and echoes. So like I'm sure there was some like it was probably more vocal than anything within music. Like they could have like banged stuff, but I don't know if they had like structure to be able to do something like that. Very well could have, but
Yeah.
I think for the most part it was probably more vocal. If there was any music at all. Um, and then yeah, games wise, I have a feeling there's little to none. I'm sure there was small things, but I wouldn't say they had like oh yeah, let's go play kickball with the stone ball out back. You know?
I know they weren't kicking a stone ball too far as that goes, and I'm sure they had better sense, but I'm thinking, of course, on the side of being winter and having to preserve certain food and then also be readily available to keep yourself warm to avoid freezing to death or even having to bear the elements. I imagine that during the summertime, this is when, or, we'll just say warm time, and in this case, spring, summer, whatever. When that time existed, they had that opportunity to be able to, well, not only further what they were doing as far as gathering wood for the wintertime and probably food, but I guess also in figuring out how to preserve certain things and then also trading with other local clans and stuff like that. I'm just thinking there had to have been some sort of, and it didn't even have to be downtime as far as playing games like Kick Rock or Tag the Velociraptor or whatever. I'm just thinking as far as these basic games could have been as easy as some easier symbolic form of duck duck goose even. And I know that's saying a lot, but I'm imagining that in some fashion, not that they were going to go crazy for not knowing certain things or acting a certain way, but I'm sure there were days where, oh man, we've been hunting for 8 days straight, and at this point I imagine that maybe one of those days was a little more prosperous than the other, and they had a little more food to feed their family, and so they were able to, like, all right, we could dial it back a little bit. That in those moments that there existed, even if it wasn't some outdoor sport game, even if it wasn't some uh game of like hangman with ash on the wall of their cave or something like that. I'm imagining that in some fashion, maybe they even got together some tiny stones and stuff like that and did like minor gambling in their cave or something like that. All I'm saying is that there had to have been some form of entertainment for themselves that it didn't have to take hours or days or anything to like play a game or mess around or just do something that was fun in their case. I think it was more of a, uh, I'm sure they have some type of competitive edge within them, being that it wasn't always possible to do something that they wanted to do, hunt, um, procreate with another wife, in this case, who even knows if that would even have been a thought as far as like, whatever. And then also on top of that, uh, being able to even think about partnering with other clans. Like for the thought of the matter of coming up with it in the first place, who knew if they even understood that other colonies or other cave people existed? So, case in point, passing the time, finding things to do. I mean, maybe being bored was their normalcy. I'm not. I can't say. I have no idea. I just think it's funny to think of the hypothetical moment in time where cave people existed. They did this, that, and the other, and it's like, huh? You think cave people knew how to make mayo? Just like random things where it's like, whoever even would have thought of this had they not just like been sitting in their house eating a PB&J and just been like, huh? You know what? So for me, that would be in this very moment, wondering if cave people knew how to play dice or something like that, along those lines.
You got me with the mayo.
The mayo, dude, yeah.
No, but you're right, and it's like, again, I'm sure we're not giving them nearly as much credit as they deserve for
The
what they
critic,
did.
shout out cave people.
No, I just mean in the sense, like, I'm sure they were much smarter than we're making them out to be. Um, But I think if anyone thinks of like cavemen, you would think of strictly primal human, probably not nearly as smart as we are. And then it's like whenever I think of a caveman, I always remember the regular show episode of what was his name, Greg.
Greg, yes.
They thawed Greg out. He was like frozen down in their in their basement freezer. Like they walked like a little further back in the freezer, and they found like Greg and his whole clan like frozen in the freezer. They unthaw Greg. He comes out. They try to teach him how to be like a normal human, normal human in like today's society. And like he just wasn't having it. And then he unthawed the rest of his clan, and they started like absolutely trashing the house in the park. And then in the end, he wanted to be frozen again with his wife. So, I have no idea where I was even going with. The point is, like, I just like they're always like out like sought out to be like stupid, or like at least in this case a Neanderthal, someone very slow. And case in point, the Neanderthals were early human. So it's like we have this general image that cavemen were stupid, which is probably very far from the case. I think there was a lot of intelligence within what they were dealing with and what they were able to access, considering the situation they were in. So you could be very right with the idea that there was much more. It's much more than we're actually thinking, that they were capable and able and were actually doing at that time. Like you said, like with any type of like games to pass time, it's very possible that there were things they were doing. Different methods of actually preserving food. I'm sure there was different methods. And even like if you look at earlier times, after prehistoric, a lot of the times they were coating meat with salt, or move a little further, they were coating meat in butter to preserve it, so on and so forth. Plenty of different ways to do it. Maybe not as beneficial, or maybe not beneficial is not the word. Maybe not as useful. I guess we'll just go for useful. I can't think of the other one. Maybe not as useful, and maybe not as consistent or reliable. But I'm sure to some extent they were able to preserve, so on and so forth. You get my point. But I think cavemen were probably extremely smart for their time, and were able to do a lot more than we're making it out to seem. But it is quite funny to think about, prehistoric man going crazy in the jungle, actually getting slapped around by these large animals, and like I'm just curious, like certain things that they've seen that we couldn't even dream of. Like I said it before, but I think about, like, you see all these videos today about people like wandering in the woods, like either going camping or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And like stumbling upon like animals unimaginable. Like things within the woods that you wouldn't even like think about. Like I mean, in this like extreme case, like cryptids, but just like encountering like something.
Oh, yeah.
Something you have no idea what it is. And obviously, what was that?
Excuse me. I was going to say I'd be terrified, and that's where one of the top three comes in, and that being fear of the undiscovered. Seriously.
Yeah, primal fear, dude. That is strictly primal fear, and if in any case where you're in that position, whether you're out in the woods, alone, or just in the dark, outside or anything, there's always this primal fear, that something is either like watching you or following you, or so be it. And then it always amazes me. I'm sorry to keep talking so much, but it's just like Like I don't mean to drag this into it, but there's what they say is the sixth sense, where it's not the sixth sense, uncanny valley. I guess it is sixth sense, where we have this primal like understanding that, or a primal fear and knowing of something that is humanoid-like or is human-like but is not human.
Yeah.
And they state it as a primal like instinct, something that earlier man had to understand was in front of them, essentially.
Interesting.
Something that is human but not human. Understanding that what you're looking at is not right.
That's interesting. I guess in that instance, I wonder how often the cave people were running into things like that. And I imagine that a lot of what they ran into, they were worrying or wondering or curious about what that thing could exist as, if it was dangerous, if it was something they could cook to eat, if it was something they should just avoid entirely. And of course, with a lot of experience barreling on through time, their initial circumstances running into these things were completely different than what it would be later, after things were documented, after things were found out as to what they could do, their threat levels, the risk you would take upon eating it, hunting it, etc. So for them to be able to lay the groundwork, I mean, I don't know if going as far as to say as they were brave, moreover than just pure luck or stupidity in that case. I'm not sure. I think painting those hypotheticals are nice because then all you have is your wonder. All you have is your curiosity to just sit there and ponder about what could have been for their circumstances. And I think it's funny for us to go through the hypotheticals too, because we get to think about stuff that we realistically have no idea whether or not was the case or if it was even something they had to think about. And for us to have some type of brain to process these thoughts, they just had an instinct to act on probably almost immediately in their circumstances. So definitely cool to figure or even toy with the ideas that these people had to go through. Well, the certain instances of this uncanny valley or their sixth sense. And then on top of that, also be able to navigate just the unknown with literally nothing but, well, and for them having made basic loincloths or just stick weapons or even just the vibrations of them clicking their teeth and tongue together or something like that. And who knows, their methodologies for doing all sorts of things, hunting, eating, singing, talking, playing games, like we said. It's all just this. Of course, I don't know enough about cavemen to have said, yeah, I did the research, but just all these hypotheticals that we said. It's I don't know. It's fascinating in the sense, but also, how would I say, confusing as well to think.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're just kind of spitballing here. Honestly,
Oh yeah.
it's a lot of fun. But I think I wanted to add on to, like, you were saying that they were brave, or you weren't sure what to say within that.
Yeah.
And I think they were just they were just living. I don't even know if we. I was to say, I don't think we can even say that they were brave because they simply just had to do what they needed to do.
Yeah.
I think I'm sure there's a form of respect that we give them for obviously getting to the point so that we are who we are now, of course. There's always respect for past lives that have been lived. One, to give us knowledge and information, and two, to better our lives now and today.
Right.
That is the whole point of understanding history, for what it is, so that history doesn't repeat itself, but seems that pattern has reoccurred over and over again. Besides the point, I think we can only really give them respect. I don't know if we can call them brave for simply just needing to survive. Sure, like in our instances, we can say that they were brave in comparison to what
huge balls, dude, huge,
dude. Compared to what we've experienced, dude. Yeah, no, I mean like balls the size of cinder blocks hanging off of them. incredible. Like I give props to every ounce of those beings for surviving what they did. Without a doubt. Like there's just no
Yeah.
way I could live like that because I
Oh,
would
yeah.
probably die.
Oh, yeah.
I'd probably give it a good shot. And
Oh, yeah.
I give myself like out in the wilderness, I give myself at least like I don't know, I think I could probably last like anywhere between 5 to 10 years before I just completely shrivel up and die.
With dinosaurs, I give myself 4 days max. 100%.
Dinosaurs though, like today I give myself like 5 to 10 years. And then maybe a little bit longer depending if I can get used to that idea. If I lasted 5 years, I'm getting anywhere, I can probably live
Yeah.
until I
At
just
that point, you
naturally
pretty
die.
much know what's good, how to survive, etc. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, like I'll figure it out. Sometimes, I might fall down, But against dinosaurs, dude, I give myself maybe like I'd give myself a week. I think I can manage a week,
7 days ain't bad. That'd be huge.
I give myself a week, but more than likely I'd be Tim getting pulled away by a giant mosquito, like just out of the blue. I'd be walking around like foraging for something, and then boom, right in the back, I'm pulled up and out into the sky.
Day
Gone.
7 was don't touch the Velociraptor gone wrong. I'm telling you, that game gets dangerous. And Fred knows
dude,
firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, before I knew it, I was playing kick rock, and I didn't even realize where I was, and I ended up stepping off a cliff. You never know.
But realistically, I'm glad the caveman talk got such a popular reaction out of our hypotheticals, because that's all it is. But realistically, I know we are in wrap up mode here. So
Yes.
send the viewers on their final thought point on our lovely cave people, and hopefully some type of inspiration for them.
Well, I think you heard all my thoughts on cavemen, so I will leave it at the last thought that I gave you all. Just take. I don't even have any like things to say to uplift someone about cavemen. But if you really, just hey, listen. Don't play kick rock too close to the edge of a cliff.
C'est la vie, I guess.
Stay away from large dinosaurs that are wanting to kill you. And you know what? Sleep tight on that nice fur pelt that you got 2 days ago in your cave. That's all I got. Anything you got to say?
I liked your, how did the saying go? If you don't learn history, it's doomed to repeat itself, more or less.
Yeah. That was your final quote.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good one. I think the cave person, perfectly personifies any issue that you would deal with about having learned from said experiences, putting them into action today, or not putting them into action because you understood something that was completely gone wrong or something that went completely right. So yeah, of course, if you don't learn history, history is doomed to repeat itself. As the classic saying would go. I know I botched that slightly, but in more or less words, it means the same thing. So
Yeah,
regardless,
right.
Breakfast Brothers, thank you for your cave love, for sending our cave love back.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed Caveman Talk. And excuse me. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the show. As per usual. Check us out over on YouTube. Give us a subscribe over there. Give us a like if you feel like it. Recommend us to your friends, your mother, your father, your grandfather, your great aunt, your cousin, who's a cousin of your other cousin. And then hop on over to Spotify and give us a follow there. We'd love to have you on both, or just one, whatever you're feeling. I don't care. You're your own person. Free will's a thing. But we're gonna send you out on our outro. We're gonna be trying that again. Hopefully things have been fixed and we can actually have nice little outro music. So you're gonna be first experience right here if you listen to today's episode. Count yourself as the luckiest person on earth. But anyways, we'll catch you guys on the flippy flop. Peace out.
Out for the, I'm walking the booga. Out for the, out for the, out for the, out for the, out for the.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.